Well, hi, homies, or veterans, or whatever, whomever is listening at this time. Well, so I was once in the military. At the time, I had long hair and wrapped it in a big bun. They didn't like any hairs out of place. And then we wear these camouflage hats sometimes, but we also wear like heavy helmets on our heads, like heavy helmets. And then a lot of times we wear the camouflage hats underneath. Anyway, then we'd have these layers upon layers. You get a shirt and then more layers. Well, anyway, one day in training, I broke my neck. Like that. It just, and what happened was I fell upside down with sort of this momentum, like I was upside down, and then my body just went whoop like that, like whoa, off of this bar that was like 6 feet tall or whatever. And everyone was just like, oh my, when I got up, their faces were like, oh no, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'm okay, everything's fine with me. And I put on a happy face like this, and they had me in charge of about 40 of these people. So there's a lot of them. And they're like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine, everything's cool. But then I wasn't. I started feeling awful in my neck, and then up into my head. It started to be like, whoa, shit. And then a couple of my friends, they dragged me into the ER, which was one of my worst experiences. It was a thumbs down on the Moncrief Hospital in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. A real thumbs down. I waited in the ER, not even getting triage, for about 3 hours. I was like curled up, like in the fetal position, kind of, and it was the first time like fluorescent lights were like, ah, like, and they hurt. My head just hurt, and I was like trying to hide my eyes, and like I was in the ER for 3 hours just sitting there like that. Well, anyway, like so I was just like coping with migraines, and then I graduated from that. And then I ended up in Texas, where I was training as a combat medic. So again, I was back into the hospital, but I was in and out too of like, hey, I got these migraines, I got some problems, and sometimes they give me this brown paper sack, like this, like, and it was full of meds, And they said, here, you have this plus nothing. So first off, when I broke my head, and then my friends were like, oh, you're feeling like crap, let me take you. So 3 hours of just waiting like this. And then they did an x-ray. They saw there's a fracture. No MRI. It could have been worse. Sometimes I have like fiery shooting pain in my spine here, like, so you got these vertebrae, and they're like, oh shit, they're on fire, and so sometimes I feel like, dang, this hurts so bad that I'd like to die, right? So I'm just laying here, and I'm like, oh, I'd like to die. And that's how I felt under the fluorescence, and then also I felt invisible. I felt very invisible. And this is how you're treated as a veteran, as a kind of you're just, whoop, And so then I would get the narcotics in the bag here, and some of these people would be like, hey, what you got? What you got? And I'm like, I don't know, dude. And then it made me feel like kind of like this, like in the eyes, like, oh shit, like this, like, oh crap. And then I'm like, oh, and then I'm like spiraling down, and then I'm working for the military at the time, but I'm just I'm being trained, but I'm also just spiraling down. There's so much pain that I can barely sleep at night, but then every morning you're up and you're running and you're doing your push-ups and stuff like that. You're just going for it, you're just running, but all the while I'm in this fucking haze, in my eyes, and it's just like I'm fading. And then I'm taking the narcotics for a little while, and then I'm like, oh shit. I was the only girl most of the time. Sometimes there's another girl in the main fastest run group, and they're all usually in front of me. I feel like, well, not always. Sometimes I'd be like mid-pack, but sometimes I was like, oh, I'm lagging here. And like my run times were going down. My migraines were just like, oh shit. Because when I started in the military, I was like able to like go out and race triathlons and do stuff. Then afterwards, I'm like, oh crap, I got some chronic fatigue and migraines going on, and I want to die or whatever once in a while because the pain's so bad. And so then we go down, down, down. But every morning they're just like, go, go, go. And everyone's like running. And then when I was in Texas, when I was training as the EMT, as a combat medic, after I graduated from the little basic training or boot camp, whatever you want to call it, then I was in Texas and I was running, and they actually diagnosed me as having asthma because I kept going like, like I'd never had that happen, but I was like, I don't know if it was a result of like my immunity from my neck. I got like immediately, like when I was like this, my temperature was like 103, and they kept me overnight, just overnight. That's how long they kept me. So this is something like, okay, so this injury sucked, right? It was the bar was kind of wet. It was an obstacle course. I was going upside down and whirly whooped on my head. Sucked, okay? But the aftercare was, to me, worse. So then, migraines, all that, fever. And so I start sort of spiraling down, but I'm still kind of like getting pushed through, and my body's still doing what it likes to do, which is I like to run or like to exercise, and I used to race or whatever. So I'm competitive, and then I'm keeping up with the guys. But then I got this like, and then so for a second I took the little inhaler thing, and for about a week or two, and I'm like, oh, that feels worse. It feels like little shards of glass on my freaking bronchioles. So yeah, I gave that up. I think it was like maybe the pollen, in the Texas trees. It would have been around, July, perhaps. It was right outside of San Antonio. And, who knows? Or just kind of the, whatever, the air was maybe a little damp. So anyway, I kind of lagged behind the guys for a minute. And I was running about 7-minute miles, which I thought was pretty slow at the time, but now I realize that's really fast. When a few years younger, I was running faster than that. But anyhow, so then graduate from there. But yeah, the migraines are bad, and but so I'm afraid of the medical. I'm afraid of that. So I'm like, well, stay away. You got to stay away from what they prescribe or whatever. So just kind of wean myself. And so now sometimes I'll be laying in bed, and there's my eyebrows, my eyeballs, and I'll be laying in bed, and I'll be, reading a book, and let's see if I can hold this book here. Okay, I don't know, something like that. Let's say I'm wearing my nightgown here, reading this book, but sometimes I put needles in my head, like, let's see if I can do that. But yeah, I put needles into my head, and there's kind of like a pattern that you do them in, and it feels pretty good. And so there's a lot of things that I do. Try to drink a hell of a lot of agua, and try to do that, try to avoid nasty shit, like things you can't pronounce on a label, or even just sugars, trying to avoid sugar, because a lot of times that ends up in a headache. Alcohol too, like I thought, oh, I can drink a little bit of alcohol, and then well, no, it kind of makes me act like a fool, and it gives me worse of a headache. So so then I'm definitely not smiling, like I'm like, ooh, like that, and then yeah, sometimes the pain is so shitty that you think, well, my head feels like it's just exploding, even though I've been doing the right things. I've been avoiding all this stuff, like what the fuck, and so you're like, how come my head hurts so bad, like, and then so then I start thinking, well, if I had a little gun, then I would just relieve some of that pressure, but I don't have one of these. I don't have a gun. My veteran friend had one, and he used it. He did. So I don't do that stuff. I don't do that. And thankfully the waves are such that, oh, okay, well, I got a pretty high threshold of pain up here, and I can I can surf that maybe really terribly, but like what, and I'm like, what, help me, like up here, I'm like, help me, this is bad, but then down here it's like, oh, hey, then where you have those hey, how's your pain, right here is about it, like this, like kind of like so I'm like, that's okay, that's more of like a 2 or 3. I'm almost forgetting that there's a fire in my neck and a twisting knife. I'm almost forgetting that on days like this. Like, oh, look, hey. And then you get up to here again and you're like, oh no, this sucks. This really sucks. And then sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'll be in one of these days, and I'm like, okay, I'm cool, thumbs up. And then I'm like, I can commit. I can do, all these things. I'm gonna make a list of to do, and then the pain creeps up, and then I'm back in this fetal position and pleading for mercy. And so anyway, this is kind of how it feels somewhat to have some pain. Also, so I broke my wrist pretty hard, and you can see it looks different than the other wrist. I'm surprised it works at all. Anyway, there's kind of a black and blue that happens in here, and some protrusion and some crinkling, and then sometimes the pain will shoot up into my shoulder. Ouch. In the middle of the night, I'll get this like, ah, how, ooh. And then I'm like, oh, that hurts, Jody. That hurts a lot. And I wake up and I'm like, oh, geez. And but then I'm also like, oh, here's my neck. I better adjust my head on the pillow. So anyway, sometimes I use the TENS unit, which is like shocks on these pads on my wrist. And then, oh, actually it would be this wrist. It'd be my left wrist, sorry. Now that I'm looking at it, yeah, that would be my right. My right hand's all right. Right hand's good, thank God. That was one of the first things. So I broke my left wrist on a bicycle. Whoop! Bad news. I was like in these like aero bars. So I was like just lean forward, and I was in these like attachment aero bars. I was like just speeding along, like speeding, and I think I was going like 23 miles per hour when I went loop-de-loo, and then crashed and broke this wrist and had 2 surgeries on it. And then I broke my wrist again or years earlier when I was playing softball. And I felt like an idiot, but I'm like, oh shit, so basically the ball, I was a lefty, and the pitcher, I think it was a rise ball or something, but it was like, holy shit. And I just, I kind of stepped back a little bit because I could see it was coming towards me, but I was willing to take the ball, and actually I ended up scoring too. But the ball hit me right in the ulna, and the ulna is kind of vulnerable. So in this accident, it was the radius, which is pretty huge bone, and the ulna is a really little bone. But so it always was like the radius was like my splint when I broke my ulna, and I actually continued to play a little bit of softball, kind of wrap it up. But it was a broken ulna. Right, it was a pretty good size break in the ulna, but because the radius was very good, it was all good. And then I shattered my radius again after those 2 surgeries I had when I was 17, 18. I shattered my radius because of my rollerblading. So I went into a bowl, and I was avoiding a skateboard kid who was like, oh, I'm dropping at the same time she's dropping. And then I was like, oh, I better swerve. I was going to go straight, but no, because he's dropping, I'm going to swerve. And then my left wrist went into an embankment here. I was supposed to go like this way, down a ramp, and then it shattered. And I was like, just yelling the F word. Woohoo! Speaking of F, I like the sound of that on my banjo. It's like this and this string, and then this string, and you're like F F F, and then you can make a C or an A minor. It sounds fantastic. I hear it's way harder on the guitar, so people when they're doing the F, they're like F. And I like it. I like the sound of the F, I mean, what's not to like, Anyhow, so it felt like there was this thing in my neck, right? That was just like, oh God. And then I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, help. So I was in and out of like the hospital, sort of urgent care hospital part of the hospital when I was in basic training, and then also when I was training to be a combat medic, EMT. And I did complete that. I did pretty good. I was kind of near the top of my class. But I guess so for me, I was like, oh, well, I'm barely sleeping and I'm in a ton of pain, and I'm running slower, and my brain isn't quite working as well as I want it to. So these tests I should be acing. I was acing, math and science in high school. What's wrong with me? So I kind of like, oh, geez. But then they're like, hey, well, look at you. You're in the median. So, you're fine. You're right there in the median. And so, like, you're having your highs and your lows of pain and ambition and misfortune, but you are right there in the median. There's no real red flags about you. In fact, you can just fly, the American flag. You're an American. And so I was like, okay, that's cool. And so I kind of focused on like helping some of my buddies because I had some friends who were having a hard time with their running. And so okay, well, let me help you get through this training and stuff. And then I had weekends where I drank a little too much and I'm like, oh, headache. That's bad. But not too much, just a little. But enough, enough. Drink, any amount for me is probably good. But anyway, so then, or too much, any amount for me is too much, like more than good. Anyway, so I had this neck thing, and to this day, 21 years later, it is so bad. It's like, oh shit. And it's only getting worse, so it's like the osteoarthritis is like, and so, yeah, I mean, I compare it, well, so I've had 3 childbirths without any kind of pills or needles in my back, and those are hard. Childbirth is really hard. You got this like ring of fire, and then out comes this precious baby. You're like, hey, buddy, and then it hurts to like go to the bathroom for days while you're breastfeeding your little fellow there, and yeah, some women have it very much more difficult than me. I was lucky, but so childbirth is hard, and for me it was, I don't know, the 12 to 24 hours, or well, the first one it was like no sleeping for 48 hours, and then the contractions got more and more intense or gradual, and then well, I guess more something like this, like, oh, here's the contractions, and then here's the contraction, like, and then out comes the baby, and and then it was like an 18-hour, 12-hour with the next 2, so I had, 3 wonderful, healthy boys, and then, so I'm really lucky, really, really lucky, like, thumbs up on that, that was worth every ounce of pain, and many years of making sure there's enough beans and rice and oatmeal, and whatnot in our little house. We have a nice little round house, kind of, and there is like good people, good memories, and those kids are now big. One of them is like 200 pounds, and he's massive, and when he came out, his head was very big. It was a big circumference, and there's a lot that went into that, especially avoiding these things, and so they grew up with really good foods, and some of that was from milking goats, so we had these goats, and they you have, and then you make cheese if you can, which some of them were good, some of them were really bad, bad molds. You're like, oh, that's bad. But then other, you milk the goats, and then you make kefir, and that kind of heals the bones, and is good for all the digestion, and the goats were fun. We did that for like 10 years. That was cool, and the kids ran around barefoot and played and enjoyed, and it was a good time to heal. Maybe smile somewhat, because it's like, oh, well, that's beautiful. I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky, and so during that time, I was like, well, I'm not a veteran. I'm just a person here, living on the farm, and so I had these dreadlocks that were way down. They grew all the way down to my thighs, these really long dreadlocks, and I was like, well, I'm not a veteran at all. I'm just a person, But then I had this friend who pulled the trigger on himself like this, and then I shaved the dreadlocks. I shaved them off. I just had like a little tiny bit of hair, and then now I have a little more. 5 years later, I have a little more. There's a little more here. But yeah, being a veteran and having chronic pain is a lot, So so sometimes I talk about the other pain. Oh, my wrist. Oh, that hurts. Yeah, you can see it kind of hurts in there. But when you compare it to the spine, the vertebrae in the spine that are on fire, then it sucks. And so, I guess, all that being said, you have to come to terms with sort of who you are and where the hell you're going, and I still don't know. I feel like this, like, oh well, shit, I don't know, and then so I don't know, then becomes, like, I don't know. I don't know. But it's also like, oh, fun. I don't know. Like, fun. I don't know. But it's so many things. It's like, it becomes my religion. It becomes, well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything. I don't really know how bad my pain is going to get. And then it's like, then I'll enter this sort of crossroads. I'll enter the crossroads of, well, do I, take, some kind of a drug, I've been offered a lot of prescriptions. I took at the brown bag, I took the brown bag that the military said, here, take your brown bag, I took all that. And I discovered that within the brown bag, the pills and whatnot in that brown bag made me feel dizzy and nauseous and unhappy, kind of partially there. And so I'm not there yet. But also I respect and I consider, my friend who did the suicide, who took that gun, because he had far more going on that was very sad and terrible with his health and with all the things. And so I suppose when I look at his life, I'm like, well, I am a great deal more blessed, and I have much more of a purpose than him, for sure. And I ought to just keep on going. And there's nothing, wrong with mourning or being angry, as Mr. David Cho would say, anger. We got to get out some of this anger. And so, yeah, I am a veteran who was treated with an insane amount of neglect at the same time that I was learning how to be a medic and learning how to triage. I was also being neglected and tossed away, treated like very badly. So I, do I have bitterness? Yeah, sure, I got some bitterness. I got some despair. I got some, grief. I got all sorts of terrible, terrible things. Demon, things here. I make some horns coming out of my head here. There's some demon things. And so sometimes when, I still rollerblade. I rollerblade the hell out of shit. I don't bike anymore. I don't like biking. Biking, my sister races bikes or does bike stuff. I don't bike, because I don't like the way it feels on my lower back, like down into into the lower back. I don't like that. So I like this. I like rollerblading. Although I did crash the other day. I have this right here. It's healing fine. But yeah, I crashed, tossed a cold coffee, just tossed it, and just, laid there, realizing, okay, I can move. This is okay. There's a little bit of blood, a little bit of, I lost a $5 coffee. That sucks. But overall, I just sort of evaluated. I evaluated and just laid there. And I thought to myself, I'm pretty lucky. I'm a lucky person. And yeah, it's like there's nothing I can do about this pain that I have. The pain that starts, in my neck, and it goes up into my head, and it hurts, a lot of times my eyes, behind my eyes. I'm like, there's migraines just kind of, temples, but mostly it's like right here. It's like, oh, well, there's your broken neck, and then it shoots up. And so I started going to acupuncture finally. It's really cool, and she puts the needles in here, but I was putting them in there already. I bought my own needles, but the military finally started paying for acupuncture, so I was like, sweet, and so I started going to this nice lady. She's got long gray hair. She's really pretty, and she puts the needles into my head, and you got the heat on your back, and but mostly she puts them in the hard to reach, here. Give me some needles. Just shove them in the right places, And then she knows other places, like on the soles of my feet, and like right here. Let's see, right here. This, right here in this crease. Lots of great places. So it makes me happy. Like, oh, hey, I am getting acupuncture, not just for myself, because I've been doing acupuncture on myself for about 12 years. So yeah, when you have a lot of pain, you bust out all the tools. And so yeah, there is some veterans who feel an insane amount of pain. They feel very sad, and they consider suicide. My sister is a doctor of psychology, and she is very nice, and so she'll sit and she'll talk to the veterans. She'll, give them tools to help with their life and all this. And anyway, so I am not ashamed to say, although it is very taboo to say, oh, well, sometimes I, think about, ending the pain, and it, inherently, I think, as humans, we protect our life. And then the other thing is you want to remove sort of the means of suicide, which for my friend was that gun that I had talked about over here. The gun, you want to remove that. You want to, oh, can I borrow your gun? Can I take it? Anyway, I don't have one of those. So yeah, occasionally, sometimes I'm like, oh man, my head feels like it's exploding. Let me take a little gun to it. Well, I don't have a little gun. I've actually never shot a little gun. We shot the big ones in the military. We shot the M16s. So I don't actually have a little gun. But yeah, you don't want to have access to that if you're tempted to do that. And anyhow, so sometimes it's like you feel that way a little bit, and so of course it's not just veterans that feel that way. It's all sorts of people that feel that way. All sorts of freaking people. And so I do my rollerblading, and I do all sorts of stuff to not feel that way. No, I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to feel that way. And so do all sorts of stuff. You bust out every tool. and then you just keep on, keep on going. You keep on going, and you go with, because eventually you get into maybe a new pattern, a new things are okay for a couple of days, and things are beautiful, and next thing you know, you're a whole new person, and you have different cells. You don't have the same cells that you had a few days prior. You have different cells, and they are just mastering all of the things within you and making you feel all new and all unique and desiring and lovely of life, instead of pondering death. Of course, if you are going to ponder death, it is good to kind of delight in the moment, because of course one could die at any moment, whether one plans to or not. And I suppose I have to say that for my friend Robert, with everything that was going on with him and his suicide, I hold no judgment. It was painful. It was, as his friend, but I understand why he did it, and I understand that my life is much more pain-free and rooted in community and blessings than his was, and that my demons are a lot more manageable than his was. He had a great deal of military trauma, both physical and emotional, that he battled. And so I am a very, very lucky person. So on that note, I will leave you with my sort of, where I was telling you, that I had this problem. I had this, and it's still to this day a major problem, where my neck was just, and it is just crying out to me, and just kind of like right at the base of my skull, where the vertebrae kind of go up into the base of my skull. There's this insane amount of pain that just radiates all the time. And people suggest all sorts of things, surgeries and medications. But the thing is, those results are not always cut out to be what they hope for, and can often lead to much more terrifying experiences of lack of mobility and uncontrollable pain. So what happened was, shortly after the injury, about a couple months after the injury, I was walking, and I just had to keep moving and being alone if I could, because I was training in the military, and it was hard to get away from people. And I was walking, and then I ended up in this rainstorm, and it was just pouring down rain. It was just pouring down upon me. It was pouring down rain. And I was like, oh no, because I had a book on me. I had a few things with me that I didn't want to exactly get wet, even though it was in San Antonio and the weather was actually pretty beautiful to be raining at that time. And I was caught in this rainstorm, so I decided to take refuge. I found a park, and I ended up going into a tube. It was a tube in a play structure. it was interesting, how this all worked out. But so I had this, it was like a tube, and like one of those platform kind of things, and all of these little play fort kind of things, and then another, like a slide that was made out of the same thing as the tube. And I was like hunkered in there. I was hunkered in that tube. And then the rain was just going and going. It was just raining, and I was hunkered in the tube. And I was very much at that time wondering, what is to become of me, because of all this pain that I was enduring, and I could feel it was changing me. It was making me want to be less social. It was making me want to be alone and be quiet more than I ever had. It was making me feel like maybe my future was not in my control. And I was in this tube like this, and the rain was just going and going and going and going and going, and I was in the tube laying here, and I was thinking to myself, who am I? And well, I don't know, and all those things that I still to this day think. And then all of a sudden, the tube, everything lit up, and the tube was like radiating with capillaries of light. And then immediately after, the loudest boom I had ever heard. And so I'm thinking that basically the lightning may have hit one of these posts, and then it traveled down around, grounding around this tube, and then down the posts. And I was in the tube, and I felt and I heard this enormous force. But more importantly, most importantly, besides the seeing of these sort of capillaries around the tube and being like radiated, more importantly than that, I felt alive. I felt chosen. I felt like even though I had been through a major misfortune, that I was okay, and that I would be okay, and that the electricity from this this lightning bolt, this crazy energy that just radiated around the tube that I was in, this plastic tube, and it just radiated around and then swirled around my head and all my injuries, and it just swirled around me. And that was really, really the most incredible thing that could have happened, beyond any of the opiate synthetics that they were offering me in their little bag of. And so I weaned myself from all that, and kind of got in to more the cloud of unknowing, I suppose. And whenever the lightning might strike, accepting all that.